And as we wait for the outcome of this summit, let's delve into the highlights of another, the G7 summit. It concluded right before the NATO summit began. What exactly did it achieve? We've been tracking the summit, but frankly, it's hard to tell. G7 leaders had a lot to talk about, but very little to offer. On Russia, they discussed setting price caps on fuel, but left out details on how that would work. On China, they promised to end the reliance on Beijing, but the UK is not too thrilled about this. It wants to continue doing business with Beijing. Then we come to climate change. The G7 promised to set up a new climate club, but there are no timelines, no clues on who the members will be. So what exactly did this summit achieve? Here's a report.
Political banter.
Jackie talk. Jackie talk.
Impromptu encounters. A bit of bromance.
This is a reunion of a year old now. Anyway, very good to see everybody. Well done, Emmanuel.
Merci beaucoup.
Voilà.
Thank you.
The death of the necktie. And scenic lake walks for the spouses. Were these the biggest highlights of the G7 summit? Well, yes and no. They made some announcements which are being taken with more than a pinch of salt. There is a question mark on the relevance of this body. The G7 has been around for more than 4 decades. It has served little purpose other than keeping diplomats of its member states busy. When it was formed, it was supposed to represent the world's biggest economies.
We're here in Germany with the richest countries in the world.
But it remains a clique of a few Western countries, some of whom no longer enjoy the same clout. Canada's economy is not bigger than Australia's. Italy's GDP is not larger than India's. Yet, they remain the core members of this body, as the others are relegated to the status of observers. And let's not even talk about the differences. The Group of 7 has always been divided on how to tackle the world's problems. This year's summit was more of the same. The leaders had plenty to talk about, but little to offer. For the war in Ukraine, they decided to expand their sanctions against Russia. They spoke about setting up stringent fuel price caps on Russian oil, but left out details on how these caps would work. They have promised more discussion in the weeks ahead. Analysts say the plan may never really work.
That is a very clever idea, and I use clever in quotes in that statement, meaning it's probably too clever to sustain real-world implementation risk.
On climate change, the G7 decided to create a new climate club to help nations take more ambitious action. The aim will be to keep greenhouse gas emissions at bare minimum. When will this club be set up? The details were not finalized. Who all will be the members? That will be decided later this year. Climate activists are slamming the G7 for making such vague pledges.
If you look at the G7 states, all they do is create profit and everything else has a lower priority. Our health is a lower priority, our security is a lower priority, and climate is also a lower priority.
On China, the G7 led by the United States unveiled a $600 billion plan to rival the Belt and Road Initiative. The aim is to reduce China's dominance in the developing world, also the West's reliance on Chinese investments. Most G7 nations are for it. Boris Johnson is not. In an interview on the sidelines of the summit, he said the G7 needs to balance its values with doing business with China. Why? Because China, he says, is a gigantic part of their lives. In other words, you can slam China all you want, but cannot stop doing business with it. So at the end of the day, this is what the G7 summit had to offer. An unclear roadmap to tackle Russia, vague pledges for the climate, differing views on China, and a lot of photo ops. The richest nations in the world putting up a poor show of leadership.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.